Hi, before the podcast starts, I would like to mention that this show is rated TVMA and that there are spoilers in this episode. And so, if you would like to watch the show first, you probably should. But it's still a great show, even with the spoilers having been said.
Hello and welcome to the A&R podcast. I'm your co-host Ryan,
And Addison is the other person here.
and this week we are reviewing The Midnight Gospel on Netflix, which is co-created by Duncan Russell and Pendleton Ward. So, just a little background on the show. Addie, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, the dialogue in the whole show was from a podcast called the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. And I think the dialogue that is in relation to what's happening, because they'll like cut out to like talking about like, oh, there's a zombie or something like that, is
Mm-hmm.
from recorded at a later date. That definitely happened.
Well, it's very fitting that our first podcast reviewing a show is about podcasts that was turned into a show, it seems.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, usually for each episode, it does seem that it's kind of like an anthology-esque style. We got our main character, Clancy, who the best way to say is he travels different simulations through this simulation thing that he has, and he goes to different Earths to, I guess, talk about everything and anything, it seems. For you, did did you, Addie, find like the episode format like good? How like it doesn't really seem to really like have a plot, like a connecting plot between each episode, where it's
Yeah.
just like,
I feel like the only thing that really connected it was the back and forth of going into the simulations and out of the simulations, but other than that, there is nothing really to it, which um, I guess I liked because it was like kind of more of a step out of the narrowlog of his life,
hmm
um, and more of just talking about life in general instead of focusing on a narrative.
yeah. So, being an artist yourself, what did you think of like the visual presentation of it?
Um, I thought that, well, first of all, for anybody who hasn't seen the show, it seems to be hand drawn. It's probably done on a computer, but I like the way that it's hand drawn, which I mean could have some meaning to it because I feel like a show like this probably has meaning in everything. But I didn't really think too much into it. The other thing to it is that there's like quite a lot of gore involved,
Oh
um,
yeah.
which I feel like having so much gore could relate to just the meaninglessness of everything. Um, but at the same time, I don't really know.
Mm, yeah. I do agree with you. Like their visual representation of gore and nudity, as this show is TVMA, so it kind of can go anywhere at once. Honestly, personally, for me, I felt it was a little for the for all like the violence that you see. It is comedic sometimes, but also other times it was kind of like not fun to look at. However, the
Yeah.
nudity, I feel like there was only that one scene um in the episode where uh Clancy was going to go to the peaceful planet.
Oh yeah.
This peaceful, like, obviously for people who haven't watched the show, it's this peaceful planet where everyone's at peace, and it's it's like Hawaii as an island. So
Yeah.
his avatar, which he uses when he goes to each different simulation, um it was one it
It
with
was like a
like multiple penises stemming from the
yeah.
groin, and I was like, Ooh,
It was
no.
like just a conglomeration of genitalia. Like, what the
Yeah,
heck is happening?
yeah, that was
um,
interesting to say the least, probably.
yeah.
And I feel
The,
like we should get into. Sorry, you were gonna say something?
oh, I was gonna say another thing about that episode, which is really interesting, is that the whole island was filled with people who all have achieved like what is it called? Like spiritual
Nirvana.
awakening, I
Hmm.
guess. Enlightenment, that's the word. They all have achieved enlightenment and yet they spend their time having orgies. Like, I don't know, I guess it's interesting. Why?
That that is true. I feel like maybe it's in relation to when someone because or I should say um like when uh he Clancy feels like he's been enlightened in a later episode in I think in episode 6 Vulture with Honor, where he feels all enlightened and then he kind of realizes that he's not enlightened and no one really is enlightened in a
Mhm.
true sense. I think it kind of relates back to that, where when people say that they're enlightened, I would say it's kind of more of like, because no one, in my opinion, I feel like no one can really be enlightened and
Yeah.
happy, because when you think enlightened, you think very woke, like politically woke. If we're going to connect this to like what is happening today with the Black Lives Matter movement, anyone who is enlightened on the movement obviously is not happy, and that obviously is clashes with like um being like in blissful ignorance, where all these people are kind of just like in their own world. And in the episode Blinded by My End, which is where he was going to go to that world, they were literally in their own world of blissful and just blissfulness.
Yeah. I guess
Yeah,
also like being enlightened, I guess in a sense is knowing everything there really is to know about
yeah,
the meaning. So like
mm-hmm.
I guess at that point all you can really do is enjoy the pleasures of the form you're in currently.
Mm-hmm.
Um so
Yeah,
maybe that's why they did that.
yeah, yeah, possibly. I could see that. So obviously, we're talking about our main character, Clancy. What were your opinions on him? Because personally, for me, I did not think he was a good kid. He annoyed me so much, especially in Mouse of Silver. Who boy?
Yeah. Oh,
What?
I have
What were your
like
opinions?
a ton to really talk about, I guess, with him. Um, at first, I'm thinking, I love him. I'd love to be his friend. Honestly, I'd love to talk to him and just hear him ramble. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, he'd be a good friend. I'm like, wait, no. He wouldn't really be a good friend. And I kept thinking about it more, and I'm like, does he even really care about anybody but himself? um, I feel like towards the end, he does care about his mom and
Mm-hmm.
such, but I don't really think he cares that much. Plus, like, being part of his family probably isn't great because he, like, kind of ruined all of his relationships with them or they've
Mm-hmm.
died. But
Yeah.
I guess I would love to talk to him. I'm not sure I'd love to be his friend because he'd probably, like, not care about me at all. But,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
eh,
Yeah. I agree with you. Like in the beginning, like in Taste of a Kid, he just kind of seemed like he wanted to know more about the world.
mm hmm,
And like
yeah.
honestly, he kind of kept that thing until um really kind of between like episode 5 Annihilation of Joy and episode 6 Vulture of Honor, where you kind of see where it's like he's in a sense broken, because like um he's trying to find himself through these space casts, and he's just trying to find, well, I
Yeah.
guess like the meaning of himself and the meaning of like life in general, because obviously through all the episodes, Clancy goes and he talks to different people to try to understand different things. Like episode one, he talks about recreational drugs and like tripping and like how that can help you find like your inner self. And then episode two is kind of talking about the individual versus the one, as in like society and like where to separate that from. And it keeps going down and down until you get to episode seven and eight, where they talk about more like death and like spirituality of death, where you kind of
Yeah.
just see that he obviously does not like really know himself, know what's happening to him, anything, because he's obviously trying to grasp at straws. I feel like really he only kind of really learns. Like I feel like he does get redemption in the end in episode eight, Mouse is Silver, when um as you said, when he was talking to his mom, obviously shows how he loves someone, and I feel like that was him kind of learning to love himself and, well,
Yeah.
not really love himself, but kind of like accept himself, accept
Yeah.
life, accept what's happening, especially with the trippy ending of like his mom. Like that was obviously very metaphorical of his mom as a planet, and then how she's
Yeah.
kind of getting ripped apart and pulled into a black hole, which I think was supposed to be death. And then um, that is the same thing that happens to him as well. But from my memory, it kind of seemed like he would kind of let it happen. He was like, "This
Mhm.
is this is like my life. I will accept what is happening," and then kind of does that. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think also in the last episode, here's my thought about what I thought I figured out what the show is about. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
about like he's okay, no, I think I'm thinking about what the end of the show really means. I think that it
Mm-hmm.
was that he didn't actually die because he didn't. I mean, Death told him he was going to die on a rolly chair. He didn't die on a rolly chair. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it was his ego that died because him and his mom were talking about that. And she was like, you know, when you accept that somebody has died and you just kind of accept it, you don't really
Mm-hmm.
care that much. But I mean, you do care, but you don't care. Um, that's ego death. And so I think that's probably what happened to him at the end. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is that his ego died.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well then I have a question for you. So, as him and his mother are, uh, as nah, sorry, as they're talking about ego death in the simulation,
Mm-hmm.
on the outside, the police, these space police, are coming in and they're like, "This is an unauthorized simulator," and then they like blow up his trailer, which
Oh,
I thought
yeah.
was really interesting. Like,
Hmm.
and honestly, it was very, I guess, relatable to what's happening because nothing provoked the police to do what they did. But like
Yeah.
in the show, it was very interesting. I feel like that kind of makes it seem like the simulators are more important than you realize because in I think it's episode six, Vulture with Honor, where Clancy goes with the Messiah pie or the pie of the Messiah, I forget. Um,
Oh.
where he goes to his neighbor, and then you learn that this neighbor is kind of like harvesting artifacts from these simulators with his children. So I thought that was interesting. That I'm thinking that there's probably more symbolism, or there is a lot of symbolism behind these simulators and what they kind of
Yeah.
represent.
I really liked the episode that was talking about like ceremonial magic or high magic. Um, but I
Oh.
think that maybe it might have something to do with that, where it's a quicker way to achieving enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also think that it's like a I guess highly spiritual experience, but maybe that's not for everybody. Maybe that's just for Clancy, is that it's a highly spiritual experience. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that when Clancy keeps not focusing on the maintenance of it and just trying to go in, it is kind of like focusing too much on your internal spirituality and just denying your outer form its basic needs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're just all in your head instead of in your
Yeah.
body.
Okay.
um,
So you're thinking that this simulator kind of represents spirituality. Actually,
yeah,
looking at it
or
now,
maybe.
I, I, I do agree with you because spirituality, looking in yourself, because obviously when you look in yourself and you kind of look at your morals and how you feel, that is like kind of what each episode is doing. It is making you think, like you as the viewer, you're kind of thinking and you're learning like the spirituality or meditation or death, perception of death, um, tripping, depending on what it is, and how that can like in theory better yourself. But yes, I do
Yeah,
agree. Now seeing that, it's like you like if you're going to better yourself on the inside, you also have to make sure that you are staying healthy on the outside, which I think I think that is a good metaphor as well when he's not putting the green oil on himself, and then all the simulations itself or all the planet simulations itself are broken in a sense because he can't look in himself until he fixes his outer self, which
yeah,
I think is like I I think that's a good message. You should learn to understand and like help better yourself on the inside, but better yourself on the outside as well. Pers- Personally, or I should say, for you, what were your thoughts on the dialogue? Because personally, for me, I felt like it was sometimes a little too complicated.
yeah, I feel like if you really want to take something out of it, you've got to be taking notes and like
Mhm.
pausing.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess overall, it's kind of, if you're not looking too much into the show and not like focusing on what they're saying, um,
Mhm.
you're not really gonna get much out of it except for maybe a couple things that stick with you.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's so much in it that you can get a lot if you do focus really hard.
Yeah. I agree with you. However, okay, when they do, there are times when they give dialogue, like I feel like it's easier to understand depending on which episode and depending on what's happening. Like for example, in the episode Annihilation of Joy, I thought that was the hardest episode for me to personally watch and understand because in that episode, Clancy is kind of wrapped up in with this soul bird, and the soul bird and him
Oh,
are talking, so you have to listen to that. But then your eyes are also fixed on the soul bird who is connected to this prisoner, and he is trying to escape this prison, and you're just seeing all these things happen to him, and he keeps dying and then repeating.
yeah,
So that one was a very hard episode for me to do
yeah,
because like my ears were hearing one thing, but like I was more or less seeing another thing in a sense.
yeah. And their conversations were cut off just so many times in that episode. Like, okay, and now
Mm,
here's 20 seconds where they go into this other realm where I guess he,
mm.
interesting, his like soul was weighed. Um,
Yeah, I felt that was interesting as well,
yeah,
and I also feel like the episode Annihilation of Joy did actually it taught the wrong message in my opinion because it seemed like the episode was about like kind of teamwork and like doing it together and like how if you're going to try to do something or try to work through something hard, you can't do it by yourself. And you
Oh,
see the prisoner do it. You see him befriend his cellmate, and as they keep climbing levels, they keep doing it. They keep befriending people until the second to last try, he gets all his friends out, and then he sends himself out, but then he dies. And then when his soul is weighed, or his heart, or whatever was weighed, it was like, oh, you have a good heart. And then he gets like the time heart thing. And then he just kind of uses the time heart itself to escape and not help
yeah,
anyone else. I thought that, personally for me, I thought that was a really weird message to send, because it was,
yeah,
I felt like it was trying to teach me, like, oh, you should think about others and work with people and be a team player. But then in the end, it's like, well, if you have the advantage that no one else has, go do it yourself. And I was like, I
yeah,
that was like a really odd episode, in my opinion.
yeah. I guess I can also just play on the fact that everybody, except for, well, so many of the people were just pretty much animals, except
Mm-hmm.
for the interviewee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's definitely maybe playing a role in there.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I got from that episode was mostly music, like how music can help you, but I still don't even. I'm so confused about that episode, actually. I don't really
Yeah,
get it.
that episode was very, very interesting.
Yeah. Honestly,
So,
I'm still stuck on the simulator. But I think I figured out something. Because the
tell
neighbors
me.
don't seem to be cared about their spirituality. They in my opinion don't seem to care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're focusing too much on their outer selves and only using their spirituality for self-gain.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, cuz they keep like they're like so focused on like goo. Oh my gosh, we need to put on the goo. We can't like go in there for too long because it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to wreck. And maybe because they're focusing too much, it's also like doing that thing where when you're when you walk too much with like shoes with super good supports, your feet stop growing muscles, where
Mm-hmm.
like their spirituality isn't really working anymore because they're focusing too much on giving it support.
That is an interesting perspective to look at it. Yeah, and then like with Clancy, verse inversely, where he is, like, I guess, learning all this stuff, and then he is sharing it with his space cast
Yeah.
so that other people can watch it as well. Which I thought the space cast thing was interesting,
Oh.
where he had that friend.
Yeah, it was
I
just
thought,
one viewer. It's so sad. Oh my
mm-hmm,
gosh. Um that's also interesting how his dad was like, "No, you can't. Like watch that."
mm-hmm.
Hmm. So I guess that his space cast could allude to the accessibility to resources to help you with your spirituality. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because not everybody can afford like books or the internet.
I kind of thought of it in a different way. I kind of thought of it as, which I'm not exactly sure how it could connect, but I thought like a possibility it could be kind of like where Clancy is sharing these radical ideals,
Mhm.
uh,
Oh
and
yeah.
people just don't want to hear it because maybe they don't like connecting back to his neighbor, where they don't want to really um have other people like help uh help other people, or have other people help them. So I thought that could possibly be a thing.
Yeah.
So I which episode was your favorite?
Mine was Hunters Without a Home, which was episode 3. It was the one with the fish guy, who has like robotic body. Um,
Mhm.
I, I don't really know how he controls it actually, but that
Yeah.
doesn't matter. The
Yeah.
I really liked it because of all the magic involved. The magic being high magic and ceremonial magic. I think the interviewee said that they're the same thing. Um,
Mhm.
I guess I liked it because of how he said it's something that we can relate to as
Mhm.
Westerners, and then also like it's a sped up version of achieving enlightenment, which is pretty crazy. But he also like spends so much time trying to achieve enlightenment. He said like 4 hours every single day that he just doesn't have friends, which is pretty
Mhm.
sad. Um,
Yeah.
but I also really liked how he said that when he was in prison, he was able to spend so much time on his spirituality and learning about himself and also just projecting into the astral realm to explore more that it felt like he wasn't even there, but also he had all that time, which I mean, I've honestly been thinking about a lot. Like, oh, I wish I could be locked up and just have to focus on myself because of all the distractions
Mhm.
here. But
Yeah.
no, I don't really feel like being locked up in
Yeah.
a prison or anything like that. Um,
Mhm.
I also thought it was very interesting how he said that the Bible is the greatest book of magic
Mhm.
because, like, I don't think we would ever really think of it that way. It seems that magic and the Bible are two separate ideals that, like, almost fight each other.
Yeah.
Like Catholicism versus witchcraft or whatever. But
Mhm.
I thought it was very interesting, and it made me want to read the Bible, or at least some parts of it, and see how it could be read as the greatest book of magic.
Mhm.
I think that's it. The
Yeah.
reasons that I like show,
Yeah.
the episode.
Mhm. Well, I'm actually happy that you brought up witchcraft when you were talking about this because so in the episode there's a part where the fish robot person thing Daryl takes Clancy to
Oh,
like the like human thing. I'm not exactly sure how to
human
explain it.
thing.
And then there like where was like the person who was laying down and then he like goes into the ear and then transcends.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that part now.
Yeah. And then there was like I forget exactly where that was, but there was like the thing with like these jewels and they were like had silver rods connecting them. And
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting piece until I learned later kinda that's actually part of like kind of witchcraft. The reason I actually learned this was because I watched a quick video where this person was talking about how they found this Spotify podcast called Qual Ballista. I might be pronouncing that wrong. It's spelled Qabalista, and it's by Selkie Girl. So the little Spotify icon was actually the same thing, and it turns out all the songs of the Spotify playlist are supposed to be songs for someone to listen to if they want to astral project. And if you actually look at the lyrics of the song, they are spelled. So I thought that was a really interesting thing as well, where like you were talking about Western culture as well. Lots of people from Western culture, I feel, wouldn't exactly know what that means, but they're still putting that in for the few people who understand like magic and who practice magic. So I thought that was pretty
Yeah,
interesting. Hmm.
that is.
Yeah.
Um,
For, for me, I think episode 4, Blinded by My End, was my favorite episode because it talked about forgiveness with Trudy, who was like this little knight going on her adventure.
Yeah.
Personally, I thought was a very interesting sentiment that you can kind of detect forgiving someone and forgetting what they've done, because obviously watching the episode, Trudy did not forget what the knight did in killing her boyfriend. So she goes to kill the knight. So I thought that was really interesting. But then she does forgive the knight for what he does and spares him until the knight tries to kill him. So I thought that was really interesting. And then kind of how the flower in her mouth, where every time it would cut you, it would kind of do the opposite, where like it would cut you, you'd start bleeding, but then all your blood and wounds and illnesses and whatever would go back into the flower. So it was kind of healing you. So I thought of that kind of
Yeah.
more on a deeper level, of that the flower itself is forgiveness. And
Mhm.
like it's healing, like the flower physically is healing the wounds, but like on a deeper level, it's kind of healing the inner wound of
Yeah.
someone. So I thought that was really interesting. And then where the flower could kind of turn into a sword, I thought that was quite interesting as well. I'm not exactly sure what that was trying to symbolize. It could have possibly been like maybe the flowers kind of more of like the forgiveness side, and then the sword is kind of more of
Oh,
like
like the never
forget,
forget.
yeah, like how you, like as I was saying, how you can forgive someone, but that doesn't mean that you won't forget what they've done to you. So I thought that could possibly
Yeah.
be what it means. I'm not sure personally, but I that's kind of what I thought as an interpretation of it.
Did you have like a weird feeling of distrust in Trudy? Like, I feel like throughout the episode, I was like, is she gonna like turn on Clancy like throughout the whole thing? And I'm like, I don't know.
Um, Kinda in the beginning, because
Mhm.
she kind of seemed like she was very self-centered in a sense. Obviously, probably that isn't true, but I think after I realized that she was the interviewer, I kind of got a sense of kind of like warmth and like, oh, they're a good
Yeah.
person, because obviously in each of these episodes, Clancy is befriends the person that they're interviewing, no matter how good, bad, or insane they are. Like in episode 7, Turtles of the Eclipse, Clancy befriends death, and so you would think
Yeah.
that's that's not a normal thing to do. Death might turn on him, but no. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
hmm So for you, what did you think about the entire season as a whole? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What are
Um,
your thoughts?
Honestly, I think that this show might be my new favorite show.
hmm
Like, I really did enjoy it, and I think that I'd like to watch it, or at least some episodes, over and over again, because of
hmm
how much there is packed in there to understand and learn. Um,
hmm
I feel like even just looking into the symbolism of everything, there's so much to get there.
Yeah,
Uh, and it's
I
enjoyable
agree.
to watch as well. So,
hmm
what did you think,
Well,
I guess?
um, I kind of think, I wouldn't say the opposite, but for me, I did like the series. Each of the episodes were interesting, but for me, it was kind of hard to watch the series just because of all the stuff. Like you were talking about how you wanted to rewatch it over and over. See,
Yeah.
for me, I feel like you have to rewatch it over and over to understand what they're saying, because for me, I would have to watch. like I would watch an episode and then I could just binge the episodes. I would have to stop. I would have to think about what I just watched and what they were trying to say, and I felt that was kind of, like not hard for me to do. Maybe I'm just being a little lazy. That the TV show isn't exactly just upfront presenting what it wants to say, but it's making you think about it.
Mhm.
So that's good on a sense. It makes any show that makes someone think or reflect on themselves, I think, is always a really good show. But for me, I would say the season as a whole is okay. I feel like there are episodes that are way better than other episodes. Like, for example, I thought the episode Annihilation of Joy was a really hard episode to watch just because of like the disconnect between what you're hearing and what you were saying.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I
So I
agree
guess
with that.
mm, so following on the fact that you, I'm guessing you would recommend it to someone, right?
I
Would you recommend
would.
it?
I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend it to like people who are closer to my age, which is 17. Um
Mm-hmm.
and like I guess more friends I would recommend it to, but not like mentors or parents or whatnot because of like the gore and nudity involved at some parts. Not
Yeah.
necessarily like overpowering, but it's kind of like, wait, you're watching this? Um, but like, I don't know. I think it's also interesting that it is a cartoon, I guess, because I mean, there's no way that they couldn't have made it a cartoon and made it the same
Mm-hmm.
story. But
Yeah.
cartoons are usually for children, I guess, in theory.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's so much deeper than that than
Yeah.
actually for children. Like, I bet if a child started watching it, they'd be like, I don't know what's happening, but there's some blood, I guess. I don't even know
I
what they
like
would
the
think.
colors.
Yeah, I like the colors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. I think that maybe like high school and up is that the good idea, considering it is TVMA. So the
Mm-hmm.
people in that realm, I would recommend it
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Uh, I agree with you. Like, I'd recommend it to my friends. I feel like this was kind of created, like what you said, for high schoolers and as well for college students and maybe for people a little past postgrad, especially because it seems like all of us right now are trying to figure out what to even do with our lives.
Mhm.
Because you always see these things about like, oh, millennials have no idea what they're doing, and if that may be true or not true, I don't know. Um, but I feel like it's a good series to watch, like then because each episode does like as I said, it does help you look inside yourself. So I feel like that would be a good episode to watch, especially if
Yeah.
like high school, for example, you're not sure where you want to go to college. You could maybe watch a few episodes and you can look in yourself and be like, these are my priorities in life. Which college
Mhm.
will get me there? And then same with college, like what do you want to do for a job? Like for that. And then for the animation part, you were talking about kids. I feel like that's interesting. I feel like that could be a draw because um I wouldn't say there's a research, but you're kind of seeing people like who are in college, postgrad, high school are being like, oh my God, just rewatching this old the animated series that I used to watch as a kid. So it could be kind of like a draw
Mhm.
for someone. They could kind of watch or expect to watch the show and be like, oh, it's just gonna be a cute animation with maybe some blood,
Oh yeah.
gore, nudity. But then it really helps them look inside themselves. So I think that could be kind of a good thing,
Mhm.
in my opinion. Mhm.
I also
Yeah.
feel like it is good to watch like I think the best time to watch this is in high school, like they were saying, because there's also a lot of messages involved, like the one I think in episode 7 where it was like well, when like somebody dies who's close to you, you can just sit with them. Like you don't have to just send them straight to being cremated. You can spend
Hmm.
time with them. And I feel like that's not something that you can get back after, and
Hmm.
so it's good to hear earlier so that you know all of your options later on in life.
Yeah. So it's kind of like setting us up for like, I guess, like prepping us for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it, everyone. That is the first A&R podcast review on the Netflix show The Midnight Gospel,
Thank you
which
for
was
watching.
yes.
Oh man. Silence ensues. Shit.
Yes. So, wait, are you still recording?
Yes, of course I am, Ryan. Why wouldn't I be? Oh my god. Okay,
Keep this in. Keep
okay. I will then.